Hey guys, this is Yoda. So, Blizzard recently released a lot of information about 11.2, which will be Season 3. This video will go over all of the tier sets that were spoiled. One thing, and we're going over the tank tier sets, not all the tier sets, I guess. One thing about the tier sets this season are that they decided to do them based on hero tree. So, for instance, Deathbringer Blood and Deathbringer Frost have two tier sets that are very, very similar. In the Sand Lane, there's one for Rider and there's one for Sand Lane. Instead of having one for like Blood, Frost, and Unholy, it's like Deathbringer, Rider, and Sand Lane. So go over the Deathbringer one first. This is probably the better tier set of the two for Blood Decay. I foresee Blood Decay playing Deathbringer and Keys next season for sure. Casting Reaper's Mark grants you Exterminate, 2 charges instead of having to wait for it to expire. Also, the 4-piece, it can stack 15 additional times and increase your crit chance by 10% after it explodes for 8 seconds. This crit chance also gives you additional parry, which is very good for Blood Decay. Could potentially change things in the future, we'll see. Also, I think you will play 30-second Reaper's Mark, very likely. Have higher uptime on this buff. Also, you get more Exterminates. It's like 30 seconds for 3 Exterminates instead of 45 seconds for 4 Exterminates. But more importantly, the first hit of Exterminate is way more important, thanks to a change in hero tree. Whenever you do your first Exterminate, you have a chance to get Dancing Rune Weapon. So this is looking like a pretty good tier set. The Sand Lane one is not as good in my opinion. You get like a little bit of Mastery. Infliction does a little bit more damage. Blood Beast lasts for more time. And you get a little bit more damage from your Dancing Rune Weapon, but basically it does absolutely nothing for you defensively, and it's just a little bit more damage, and it's not as much damage as the Season 2 tier set. So Sand Lane is getting quite a bit worse, while Deathbringer is getting quite a bit better. So I think Deathbringer is going to be much better for next season. EDH tier sets are crazy damage-wise, but don't do much defensively. So the 2 set is Reaver's Glaive damage increased by 60, and physical damage increased by 30%. From a recent Cinnabar meter log, roughly half of the damage that you do, maybe a little bit more, is physical. So this is basically just straight up like 15% increased damage, which is kind of crazy for a 2 set. The 4-piece, Fear the Eldrachi makes your Soul Cleave do 12 slashes of Fear the Eldrachi instead of 6. Or you can get 2 stacks from like the other order. But in my opinion, you're just going to fracture first every time now to get 12 slashes, which is kind of insane. Imagine this number getting doubled in your overall, plus like physical damage increased by 30%. Obviously, you'll have less like uses of it because you don't have hunt resets from Season 2, but still seems like a pretty crazy tier set. The Fellscar tier set is also crazy, at least the 4-piece. So the 2 pieces, whatever, Immolation Aura increased by 30% and Soul Cleave by 30. Or the 4-piece, entering demon form now immediately procs Demon Surge, so your Dark Librarian, or sorry, your Feldev is now automatically proccing 3 Demon Surge instead of 2, and also you get 20% increased damage for 15 seconds on every Feldev, which is kind of insane. You basically have to play Dark Lair now, and your Metaverse also goes crazy with this. Still think Eldrachi is going to be much better in Mythic Plus, because you don't need to commit as many talent points to make it good. Because Felskar needs you need like Cycle, you have to play IS, you need Dark Lair, etc. to make it actually good. Whereas you don't need any of that as Eldrachi. So I still see Eldrachi being better in keys, but Felskar might make a pretty good splash in raid. For Guardian Druid, the Druid of the Claw set seems kind of bad. Like everything is just not as effective for Guardian. Like it's increasing the damage of your bleeds, who cares? 40% chance to make a Ravager hit again at 6% effectiveness, whereas the Feral one is like 100% effectiveness. I'm not sure why that is true, but whatever. So it's not nearly as good, I would say, even not as good as the current tier set. However, the EC tier set is crazy. So for Guardian, the 2-piece, Thrash damage increased by 20%, and it has a 40% chance to launch a Star Surge for 65% effectiveness. So this in itself is not that crazy in Mythic Plus. However, the Star Surge that you launch from testing procs Lunation, so it reduces the cooldown of your Lunar Beam by 3 extra seconds on that Thrash, which in my opinion is extremely powerful because you have much lower cooldown on Lunar Beam, which is very, very important for your class. The 4-piece also is kind of crazy. On impact, Star Surges launched by Thrash split up to 3 targets and grant a stack of Gathering Moonlight. And casting Lunar Beam increases your damage based on your Gathering Moonlight stack. So you're basically going to have lower cooldown on Lunar Beam, and your Lunar Beam is going to be way more impactful damage-wise. So this is a very, very powerful tier set. Guardian Druid is looking pretty good next season in Mythic Plus. Thanks to it. Give some DPS classes here. Monk, Master of Harmony. So the 2-piece and the Master of Harmony one doesn't look that good in keys. At least for Brewmaster. Gaining Vitality has an increased chance to make your next Tiger Palm unleash Harmonic Surge, dealing some split damage. Note that it's split damage, not AoE. It does not scale with target count. And doing some healing. This one, casting Celestial Brew, it's missing text, guarantees your next 2 casts of Tiger Palm will trigger Harmonic Surge. So this is going to do some like healing to your allies and some single target damage, but it is not going to do any AoE. So in my opinion, Master of Harmony is probably going to be out for Mythic Plus next season, thanks to this tier set being basically only single target. However, the Shadowpan tier set is crazy. So Flurry Strikes deals 30% more damage, and activating Weapons of Order instantly grants 10 stacks of Flurry Strikes that trigger on your next attack, which is kind of insane because it basically automatically procs your capstone. Flurry Charge generation increased by 100%, and Flurry Strikes triggers every 120 energy during Weapons of Order. So basically, when you push Weapons of Order, you're getting like all the buffs from your capstone talent, including the shadow damage one, like almost guaranteed, and you're having very high uptime on these throughout a dungeon, which means your which means your Flurry Strikes are going to be doing a lot of damage and giving you a lot of buffs throughout the key. So I think this tier set is very, very strong. So Brew is looking quite good next season as well. The Prot Paladin tier set is also looking very good damage-wise. So Hammer and Anvil damage increased by 15%. This is for Lightsmith. Can also be activated by Blessed Hammer. We're missing text here, but it's Blessed Hammer at 100% effectiveness. So unless I misunderstand this, Blessed Hammer hits like many more times than Judgment, since it's an AoE skill. So it has way higher chance to proc Hammer and Anvil in AoE pulls. So your AoE damage is going to go insane. Hammer and Anvil is also uncapped. So I was like on 5 targets, and Hammer and Anvil is already 33% of my damage. I cannot imagine how much damage this will do on an uncapped AoE pull. In fact, I'm relatively sure it's going to get nerfed. So yeah, this is like uncapped exponential AoE scaling is something that I don't think they're going to let tanks have, but we'll see how it goes. 4-piece is that whenever you Hammer and Anvil, you also get a stack of Masterwork up to 5. So whenever you use your holy, basically this is every time you use holy armaments, you're going to have 5 stacks. Every time, so whenever you use it, it gives a lesser version to your whole party. The weapon version, there's like, it's not really clear what it does here, but the weapon version only procs 5 times for each ally, and the shield version is extremely small. So the 4-piece is actually a lot weaker in my opinion than the 2-piece. Maybe they'll like switch the power around a little bit. But for now, the 2-piece is extremely strong. The 4-piece is not that strong. But one thing is that Prot Paladin still suffers from like being a little bit squishy and missing a lot of self-sustain. And this tier set is not really helping that at all. However, this is going to be really broken, at least at the beginning, like for PTR memes. If you bring a Prot Paladin to like a massive AoE pull, I think they might like top damage by a lot, even over DPS with this tier set. The Templar one is less crazy, I think. Empyrean Hammer deals 20% increased crit damage, and crit strikes have 50% chance to grant an additional stack of Light's Deliverance. So with Wrathful Descent, you're basically extremely incentivized to go heavy crit with both Templar and Lightsmith, because since Hammer and Anvil procs off crits anyway. So you're going to want to go Omega heavy on crit, and you're definitely going to want to play Crit Wings for Paladin. Hammer of Light deals 35% increase to the primary target, strikes 3 additional secondary targets. It can now be cast twice after Eye of Tyr. So this basically guarantees you're going to have 100% uptime on Shake the Heavens. And it also gives you 2 hits of Hammer of Light, which is 2 hits of Sacrosanct Crusade. So it is a decent amount of self-healing. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough to make up for Paladin's like lack of self-healing / being, you know, Prot Paladin is a little bit squishy. Hopefully it is. We'll see. For now, I think Prot Paladin is probably not going to be the meta tank, mainly because of Priory of the Sacred Flame. It is extremely weak in there. not only are there 3 million casters that you cannot Avenger Shield all, like you want like 2 casters so you can Avenger Shield one and have your party keep the other one. When there's like 6 casters to pull, like your Avenger Shield utility is pretty useless. Also, the first boss is extremely challenging because Word of Glory just heals for complete dog water right now. And that boss is a self-sustain check, so Prop Paladin is not very strong against it. We will see what ends up happening, but for now, I think Prop Paladin is going to do a lot of AoE damage, but it might not be able to survive the keys. Especially not Priory. Alright, Warrior got some changes, but the tier set is looking pretty good for Colossus. Demolish damage increased by 20%. Some critical damage effects increased on Demolish based on how many stacks. So you're always going to have 10 stacks Colossal Might unless it's your very first one. So your crit damage of your ability is going to be increased by up 20% on target's effective right demolish for 10 seconds. The 2-piece is okay. The 4-piece is pretty nice. Demolish increases the critical strike chance of your next 2 shield slams by 100%. They're auto critting, and these crits, not just these crits, like any crit from shield slam, increases your rend and deep wound damage by 100% for 8 seconds. You're going to want to play really high crit to keep high uptime on this buff. From my brief testing with extremely scuffed gear, like 30% crit, very low haste on PTR, I had like 70-ish% uptime on this buff. I think with like a decent gear set, you're probably going to be looking at 75 to 80% uptime, which is pretty good considering that you're Fueled by Violence. Fueled by Violence was massively buffed, so you're going to have 100% increased damage by deep wounds, and then you're getting a new talent, which is 25% more damage from deep wounds, and then Fueled by Violence is also doubled. So actually, Fueled by Violence is going to be healing you for like, I don't know, 3 to 4 times as much as it is healing you for now on live. So that is kind of crazy from this tier set. Warrior self-sustain is actually, it might be real. That is nice. The Mountain Thane tier set looked very, very weak from my brief testing. The ionizing strikes that it calls down were like 1% of my damage. So you have a chance to get a few extra Thunder Blasts, but that's really it. So yeah, it wasn't looking that good. The one DPS tier set that caught my eye was the the Enhanced Shaman one to get hype about. So Ascendance has a 100% chance to grant a charge of Tempest, and every 3 Awakening Storms activate Ascendance for 6 seconds. That's just the 2-piece. The 4-piece is nature damage increased by 3%. Or sorry, by 5% for Enhance. And Ascendance empowers your next 2 Tempests to gather a storm that deals blah blah blah, which was like roughly 8% of my damage. So the Shaman, the Enhanced Stormbringer set looks crazy strong. I haven't really looked at the rest of them. From what I've seen, tier sets in general this patch seem to be extremely strong, so I will see how that all shakes out. I think we're going to be doing a lot of damage, which means at the end of the day, once you're going to be able to push higher key levels, which means it's going to be a lot harder to survive these keys. So the tanks that are tankier, I guess, are going to thrive over the tanks that are not as tanky, which means Prop Paladin is probably not in the best spot. Blood Decay may or may not be okay. Warrior and Brew were looking kind of good, and VDH obviously is going to be almost just as tanky as it is in Season 2. So unless they do something about it, I see a VDH meta with Warrior and Brew being pretty good. Alright, that's going to be it for the tier set video. Thank you all for watching. Peace out.